Hey guys, how's it going? So, the balance patch was just shown off. I think a lot of us are kind of tired of this current meta. The last balance patch I was really hoping would be introducing some good stuff, but it ended up kind of falling flat. We're seeing a lot more DN after her exclusive equipment, and things have just kind of been pretty boring for a while. So, hopefully this patch has some interesting stuff. I already took a look at it, and I'm interested by some of the things here. So first of all, DJ Basar, long awaited, needed a buff. He's been terrible for a long time, so definitely was hoping for something for him. A lot of people are probably really happy about Haste. This is a character that's always asked about. Shu, she's kind of a weird one. I see a few people use her every once in a while, but not that popular. Alencia's really needed a change. Wanderer's Silk is kind of just a random choice, but I think a pretty decent one. Angelic Montmorency I found a weird one, since she's basically a newer player PvE unit generally, and I was very surprised to see Ross. Ross is amazing in PvE, but in PvP he's had a little bit of trouble recently, so I definitely wanted something good. And 3 artifacts being changed is definitely a nice thing, especially an artifact like Eternus that's been terrible since release, and even after buffed, it's just been awful. So, let's start with Desert Jewel Basar. So first of all, they moved his passive, which was his S2, onto his S1, which is a pretty big deal. They decreased the healing, and they increased the amount recovered if you soul burn it, so pretty much he has an entire extra skill, right? And this is the skill that they decided to add, Desert Storm. So this ability is actually kind of incredible. Pretty much what it does is it has this thing called Barrier Inversion, where if you have a shield on, it gets rid of the shield and then does that much damage equal to the shield to you. So you could actually think of it as something like, let's say they have a Fallen Cecilia shield of 4,000 health. It will do 8,000 damage to them. So basically 4,000 breaking the shield and then 4,000 to them, pretty much. That's the easiest way to think about it. So this is kind of incredible because it's unaffected by effect resist and whether or not it hits. And it also blinds, which is pretty darn nice as well, while giving an extra turn to the caster, so he gets to use S2, and then is able to use S3, chain it into this, which pushes the team, cleanses, etc. So here's a few things that are incredible about this. First of all, Fallen Cecilia is now a liability. If you first pick Fallen Cecilia, not only are you scared of Opseg, but you're also scared of Desert Jewel Basar. So there's 2 characters that can hard punish you for picking this unit. He also is able to use this against Peyra, and she has an enormous shield. So this could possibly just one-shot her outright. And not to mention, after he can just cleanse. So a character like Peyra is really bad into him, Fallen Cecilia, characters like Emo Kawaric, Emo Lilius, DN, all units that put shields on, all those shields are bad. Hua Young is another big target. Hua Young has a pretty big shield, and the fact that she gets that shield removed and takes a bunch of damage makes it pretty easy to kill her right after. So this is kind of insane. I think this ability is ridiculously powerful. Some of the strongest units in the game are actually really scared of this. And this could really change how people approach some of these picks in the draft. Honestly, I kind of feel as though this is a little too powerful. The fact that it doesn't even take effectiveness or anything and it just happens and it doesn't even have to hit, it's kind of insane. It actually does more damage technically than a lot of AoE attacks will do. If you use this against a team with Fallen Cecilia, you're effectively doing more damage than almost any AoE in the entire game. You're just hard punishing your opponent. So I think Desert Jewel Basar actually is sounding kind of busted, honestly. Not to mention in RTA, all Soul Weavers have an extra 15 speed. I think he would even be used in Cleave versus Fallen Cecilia teams, honestly. I think he's terrified. I think people are going to be scared to pick certain units into him, or just will be scared of picking a unit with the fact that you could pick him. I think he wins out hard in this balance patch. I think he's pretty incredible. Moving on, we have Haste. So Haste change is a little weird. So they got rid of the Earth Elemental crap, which is great. So he has a chance to steal one buff on S1. Okay, nice. That's kind of cool to steal it, right? His S3 is interesting. Basically, they decided to make him into Baby Ran. So he dispels 2 debuffs, inflicts 2 bleeds, which is kind of odd since I don't really see the point of it. And if he crits, he defense breaks at an 85% chance, which is the exact same amount as Ran. So Ran dispels 2 debuffs, 85% chance to defense break. The bleeds aren't as good as the stigma debuff that Ran does. But one thing that's really nice is can't trigger a counterattack. That's pretty cool. The problem is that Ran also has a soul burn that ignores effect resist, so it means you can always land stuff like the defense break and stigma, while Haste can't. Another problem is Haste has 120 base speed, Ran has 128. So effectively he's pretty much a bad Ran. He's a balanced Ran, you could say. Honestly, if Ran didn't exist and overall speeds of units were lower, like Payra, etc., I would say that he would be a pretty cool change and would actually be pretty nice. He's basically just a balanced attempt at Ran. I don't really know if this is actually going to do all that much though, and it seems hard to use him in a cleave setup because since he has lower speed, you have to put really good speed gear on him, so it feels like the only people that could really utilize him have an insane amount of speed gear that they can spread it on all these units. So I'm not really sure if this is going to be all that great overall. I'm a bit on the fence on this. His banner's currently up. I don't really know if it's worthwhile pulling him. Next is Shu. I've seen a few Shus used. She actually can hit incredibly hard. So one thing that's really important is, well, she gets the extra turn on her S1, which is pretty nice because you want to soul burn this into the S2, because when you have full stacks, she does a bunch of extra damage with this. They're decreasing the overall damage, but they're also increasing the penetration of defense by 20%, which is really huge. And now you don't actually have to have maximum stacks before healing. So she just heals and has the defense pen, and then you just get an extra boost of damage when you have max stacks. I think that's pretty good. I think it's a pretty nice change. But the really cool part is that after she S3s, she's able to have a 20% chance to counterattack. That builds up her S2 so that her S2 can do fat damage, and you know, her S1 is still doing damage and pushing her team, which is pretty great. So I think overall this is a pretty damn nice change. I think they might be buffing her to use her against characters kind of like Hua Young and stuff like that. We need more some water DPS kind of in the game that can actually fight that stuff, that isn't just something like Rem or SSB. Now sadly, the only problem is that her character model is just awful. I'm sorry if you like her, but I'm not using this character even if she's the best in the game. Alencia, this is a character I've really wanted buffed. So they're actually decreasing the damage on her S1 and S2, which seems a little crummy, but in return, she now gets a Mind's Eye every single turn, automatically. Now something to keep in mind is that it lasts for 1 turn, which means counterset still doesn't work on her, because as soon as her turn ends, she no longer has Mind's Eye. It can't be stripped, but if she has Unbuffable, she also won't be able to get Mind's Eye, so that's a bit of an issue. But now she's automatically able to go S1 into S2, and now her S2 has injuries, which is kind of interesting. I wonder how much decreased damage it really is. I hope it's not too much. If it's not too bad, that's going to help Alencia a ton. She might be decent against characters like Apocalypse Ravi slightly. And another important thing is her S3 is really good versus characters like Payra, which is really nice. And they added the extra combat readiness onto it, which is kind of just nice. Kind of like a reactive play that they buff their team. So you S3 and then you're able to go into an S1 defense break into damage, which is kind of nice. I think this Alencia change is overall good, and her exclusive equipment now gets a change where she's able to heal from her S1. So we don't know how much healing that is, but I think this is pretty nice for Alencia. I haven't really seen Alencia too much. She's kind of awkward to use right now. But I wonder if this stuff is enough to actually push her over the edge to being a nice counter pick to really high buff teams. Teams using characters like DN and maybe Emil Kolweric. And the injury might be kind of nice versus characters like Apocalypse Ravi. So I'm really hoping that she actually turns out to be pretty decent. It would be nice if they put injuries on a little bit more of her skill set rather than just her S2. But we'll see how it kind of works. I don't think that she's going to be insane, but this definitely helps her a bunch. Especially with how she's just been kind of seeing less and less in the meta over time. So, next is Wanderer Silk. When I first looked at this, I was thinking, okay, who cares? But then I noticed 14 speed to the team. She's a speed imprint now. That's kind of insane. So that means all this is a lot more valuable. You have to analyze it from a mindset of like, well, what if you're using her in cleave, etc., right? So they increase the damage of her S1, which I guess that's kind of nice, right? And they put on target. Doesn't really matter too much, but now her S2 is a little bit different. Dispels a buff from the target, and when the caster has a buff, triggers a dual attack from the ally with the highest attack. That's pretty nice. It does a little bit more damage too, but I don't really think anybody cares about that. Increased cooldown, you're never going to get a second use of it anyway, so whatever. So now she's a speed imprint that can also cause some extra damage for your team, but you're probably going to use the S3 a lot of the time. She has an exclusive equipment that actually I think removes a buff before it uses this, but she silences for 2 turns and pushes them all the way back to 0 combat readiness. And now she gets a barrier for 2 turns, and it's equal to the caster's level, so kind of like Peyra, so it could actually be a pretty huge barrier. So I guess in certain setups, or maybe characters like Spectre, Tenebra, etc., you do your whole first turn stuff, you S3, and then you might even be able to lap around and get an S2. She might become tanky enough from the shield that she gets an S2. Seems kind of nice. The speed imprint is pretty big. There's not too many characters that have 14 speed imprint. I think there's only 2 others, so that's actually pretty big, that she's now one of the fastest speed imprints for a team. I don't know how much we're going to see her in cleave compared to the other 14 speed imprints, but adding her to the pool definitely makes things a little bit more interesting. Ah, yes, and then they changed their exclusive equipment to the target chance on her S1, which is pretty whatever. Montmorency. So the main change with her, I mean, we get the extra sleep, but that's just because they're changing this rune from giving 15% to something totally different. Now her S3 is going to dispel before it does the stuff, so every time you have unbuffable and unhealable, it's going to remove both of those before it heals and puts the buff on, which is great. And now, when attacked by an enemy that's not an elite or boss monster, so not just using her as a tank in Wyvern or something, she takes 15% less damage, which is interesting. Kind of just a random little thing. I'm not really sure how much this matters, but I do like the change to dispel the debuffs before healing on S3, so at least that's useful in PvE, right? Now this is something that I think is really interesting. Okay, well first of all, Ross heals a little bit more on his S3. Okay, cool. This change was confusing a lot of people, but pretty much what it's saying is if he uses his S2 and he has the highest attack, he used to give immunity to himself and then he would give it to himself again, which means his ally wouldn't get it. But now it's going to give it to him and then the ally guaranteed, right? Or, well, at least one of your allies, whoever has the highest attack, right? The big thing, though, is this. Solitude rune. This is really nice. It's actually a completely unique thing. I think it makes me think of somebody like T-Crossit or something, where you just protect somebody insanely hard. After an ally in the back row suffers a, keep in mind, single attack, not AoE, and damage suffered is 30% or more of max health, grants a barrier to the target for 2 turns. So it's equivalent to 40% of the caster's max health, and Ross is sitting around like, I don't know, 24,000 health all the time, somewhere around there. So imagine above 10,000 health shield just being put on whatever ally in the back. Isn't that insane? That's a crazy amount of damage reduction, not to mention you could have Aureus or Adamant on the team. Imagine if you have him and T-Crossit. Then whatever ally in the back not only has 40% damage transfer, but gets 40% shield on them, right? And then you could also have Aureus. Well, not Aureus since you have T-Crossit, but Adamant shield as well. So whatever unit in the back, let's say Apocalypse Ravi, could just become invincible pretty much. I think this is really, really helpful, especially because the meta is just insane aggro damage. So being able to protect that unit in the back is really big. I think this actually helps Ross a lot at being a unit that we might see in the game now. Now, keep in mind it's a buff, so characters like Angel of Light and Peyra can still just put unbuffable and then this isn't going to do anything. So you definitely have to be careful about that. But if you can make sure that you don't have any debuffs on and you can cleanse, then I think this is incredibly good. I actually really like the idea of it. It also doesn't make him any stronger in PvE, he's already a god there, so it's a nice addition to PvP, and as somebody who used to first pick Ross all the time in PvP, I'm definitely interested in it. Now, lastly, let's move into the artifacts. So Time Matter, 12% damage at max when you do an attack, which is kind of nice. You know, it did none before, so kind of made it really crummy on that first attack. And now up to 24% extra damage if you killed something, get another attack. I don't really know if this is going to be all that amazing. I guess it helps in stuff like trying to one-shot Banshee, etc. A character like Top Model Lulika, I guess, could utilize this, but I would still rather have the Dignus Orb barrier, probably. Overall, it seems okay, but not really anything too crazy. Snow Crystal. I don't really understand this, but increases crit hit resistance by 20%. I guess this is decent on Holiday Euphane, except you still want to use the Guild War artifact, so I'm not really sure how many characters want to use this overall. Since it's a warrior artifact, you can't use it on characters like Senya and stuff too, so I'm not 100% sure who this is for. I guess we'll have to see. I guess a character like Luna could get more critical hit resistance, which is nice, but it doesn't really seem all that amazing. Finally, we have Eternus. Now, Eternus has always been terrible. Now it actually looks okay. Increases combat readiness to the caster by up to 14% when an ally has a debuff at the end of enemy's turn. So let's say Rand uses his S3. You get debuffed, then this unit gets pushed up, can hopefully cleanse. Somebody like DJ Basar, maybe. It seems like a usable artifact now, when it was just always terrible. So I think this is a pretty nice change. So that's actually the entire balance patch. I think the really big winner is obviously Desert Jewel Basar. I think he seems completely insane now. He's actually just going to turn over some of these picks that you see all the time on their head. Peyra and Emil Lilius, or no, not Emil Lilius, Fallen Cecilia, are kind of shaking in their boots, I would think, against this guy, since he basically just kills both of them completely if he's in the match. Haste seems interesting. I'm not really sure about it. Shu could actually have gotten some nice changes. Same with Alencia. Wanderer's Silk definitely got a nice addition to the game. Montmorency, not really anything special. And as for Ross, I think he got a really nice change that was much needed for him to be able to protect the team. All in all, I think this balance patch is alright. This isn't really going to change all that much of the game. Other than Desert Jewel Basar, I think the rest of the characters seem nice little things, but not really anything too special. I was really hoping for a few more characters to be buffed, maybe another ML5 as well. I do think we're going to be seeing a lot of Desert Jewel Basar, and finally the people can dust him off in their waiting room and start utilizing him in their matches. So, all in all, it's okay, but not really that big of a deal other than DJ Basar, I think. So anyways, these are my thoughts on the patch notes, and thanks so much for watching. If you liked what I said, maybe give a little follow or something, and I really appreciate you watching. Hope to see you guys next time.